Okay, so now let's talk about topic 3. The focus is on information in table 2 and a short video I created specifically for this topic. This is the video that I'm talking about. So look at the feedback provided by the professor on your attempts to clarify your own arguments. What, if any, mistakes did she note with respect to your first attempt? So now, when I'm reading your discussion, I can look at the table, at the score, and see what I said. So again, we're working together. We're creating this report, or at least part of it, through the table together. And I can check what you're saying against what I actually said to see if you're distorting what I said, really paying attention to the details of what I said, or give me the gist, however your approach is. So keep that in mind. So then you will focus on the first attempt first. So you look at what you said, and you can do things by categories. You can say, well, she said she gave me full credit for the extra credit, the diagram and the pattern, so I must have done well on that. So, or she said that I didn't. She only gave me partial credit, so I guess I didn't do that well, even though she didn't say anything specifically. When it came to the markup, she said, she noted. How many mistakes did I note? You can tell me how many mistakes did you make when it came to the markup. So, for example, if I have A and then a comment, the letter B and a comment, letter C and a comment, then you can say, I made 3 mistakes when it came to markup. And then you want to give me the gist. I do not want you to copy and paste what you have in the table in here. You need to give me the gist. So, what kinds of mistakes did you make in the markup? Did your mistakes have to do with bracketing and numbering? Bracketing and numbering things you shouldn't have, bracketing and numbering things that you, not bracketing and number things that you should have. You do not need to give me examples, like, for example, I did not bracket statement 2 in my argument. I just need the general idea. And then, of course, you go to the formatting. How many mistakes did you have there? Well, let's say you have comment D, E, and F. You can say, I also had 3 mistakes noted in that, in my first argument markup or clarification. And the kinds of mistakes I made there had to do with, okay, you might even break it down more and say, when it came to my markup, I lost this many points in my first attempt. When it came to my second markup, I lost this many points in my attempt. You could even talk about how getting bonus points actually bumped your grade. So you could talk about how, even though you did get deducted for a lot of points for formatting, and markup, you were still able to get a B, but that was only due to your ability to show some competence with respect to argument patterns or diagrams. So then we have the second question. How do the mistakes noted by the professor in your second attempt compare with mistakes she noted in your first attempt? Okay, actually, let me go back to this question right here. So some of you have been doing so well on these tasks, making almost 100% even without bonus points. So the way that you're going to handle this is, if you don't have any mistakes, or you only have few mistakes, and it doesn't seem like you've said enough, then, because I do want you to get into this quite a bit, is you might end up writing 3 to 4 sentences just to answer each question here. And if you do, you might want to break this into 2 paragraphs. But let's say you only had one mistake that had to do with uniform language. So then how are you going to have something substantive to say? Well, just use the categories that I use. So you can say, well, I got a really good grade on this. She gave me full credit for all of the bonus points. Well, what were the bonus points for? And then you can say, well, when it came to markup, I didn't lose any points, so I guess that means that I did really well, or that means I did really well, and then give me details. What is that? If you didn't get any points off for markup, what does that mean? What are the things that you did correctly? What are the different things that you do in markup? For example, you can say, I must have bracketed and numbered correctly. Well, what else must you have done well that I didn't have any critiques to make, or any any mistakes to point out to you? So that's what you'll do if you have no feedback or not a lot of feedback, or if I didn't point out a lot of mistakes, is comment on, what were the general things that you did when you were marking up the argument. You don't need to tell me specifics like my conclusion stated and I labeled it as a conclusion. No, you just need to talk about the general thing. So what do you generally do? What are you supposed to do when marking up any argument? And then say, well, I must have done this well. Also, I must have done this well. Same thing for reformatting. What are you supposed to basically do when reformatting an argument? And then, of course, you can say the one mistake I made was this or whatever. Okay, so continuing on. Now the next question is comparative. It says, how do the mistakes noted by your professor in your second attempt compare with the mistakes she noted in your first? So when you're talking about the mistakes that I told you about here, then you're comparing it to the first. So you're not, so it's a little bit different. So what you would do is say something like, well, in my attempt for week 5 task 2, I must have made some kind of mistake with the bonus points because I didn't get full bonus points for the argument for the argument pattern like I did in the first one. Or in my second attempt, I made five mistakes in my markup, but that's way better than the 10 mistakes I made with my markup in my first attempt. And then you can also break it down and say the kind of mistakes I made with my markup, I made the same mistakes, or there's only one kind of mistake that I made in my second attempt that I also made in my first attempt. Or I made different kinds of mistakes. And then, do give an example. So you don't have to record every single mistake or error, but you can always give an example of something you're talking about. So for example, you could say, in my second attempt, she noted that I forgot to bracket and number 2 statements, but in my first attempt, I forgot to bracket and number 4 statements. So I did better on that part. So you get the sense of how you can break it down and have a really involved discussion. And in fact, I think you could write, depending on how many mistakes, the more mistakes you have, the more you're going to have to write with response to each question. So that's interesting to think about, right? The more mistakes and errors you have, the more I expect you to talk and to elaborate and to comment on using the general categories of bonus points, raw score, what was your score with the bonus points? How did that help you? Did it help you a lot with your grade? Why? How many mistakes did you have for markups? What were the general kind? Can you give an example? Same thing with reformat. If you did really well, then this part's easier for you and you're going to have less to talk about. But I've already told you how to talk about, your performance if there's not a lot of mistakes pointed out to you. So when it comes to the second question, if you have no mistakes or hardly any mistakes in your second attempt, you still note those mistakes, but you can still compare and contrast the mistakes in your second attempt to your first attempt. Did you do better with something? Did you avoid a mistake that you made in your first attempt? Does the lack of feedback or the lack of me pointing out errors show that you did consistently well from the first attempt to the second attempt when it came to markup? What about reformatting? What can you infer about what you must have done well? Why didn't you make the mistakes? Did you, again, apply all that you were supposed to apply when marking up an argument and so forth? And then you have the question, how do any mistakes in your third attempt compare with your first and second? So now that I've talked you through the first 2 questions, you should have a sense of how to talk about this. If you did not get any feedback for something, did she say why she didn't give you feedback? How often, so you're going to have to you'll write a response to that, be detailed, be exact. I think everybody does have feedback. There are 2 more argument markups that I have to grade, and those will be graded very, very soon. If you don't have your grade, if you're one of those 2 students, let me know. I'll grade it immediately, but I'm planning to grade it real quick. How often or when did you refer to any feedback provided for the attempts? So this could be 1 paragraph, no matter how much feedback you have, how many mistakes you made or how little, and then you could start a new paragraph right here. Right here. This would be good for a separate paragraph. How often or when did you read the feedback? So did you read, for example, the feedback for this attempt that I gave you before doing this one, while working on it, after working on it? Did you read the feedback for both of these when you did this one? If so, before and after. Would you look at the feedback right away as soon as you saw your scores? Did you carefully read through the feedback? How did you use the feedback? Can you comment on how you used the feedback? Did you take it seriously? Did you agree with it? Were you surprised by it? So you can elaborate on stuff like that. I already gave you this. Okay, so this actually, I should have placed this right here, this underlined part. I should have placed it right here. So this is a little bit, I did not organize my ideas or points well, so point off for me. So this should really be up here. Now, you all still need to answer this. To what extent do you think your performance for the assignments noted in the table 1 impacted your performance for the assignments noted in the left column for table 2? So you could say, I think my performance in table 1 for the assignments in table 1 impacted my grades in my performance in noted in assignments for table 2 a lot, a little, somewhat, I'm not sure. And then you need to elaborate. Okay, remember, it's a good idea to use these questions and to turn the stems into either an introductory sentence, an introductory statement to let me know what you're going to talk about next. But here I'm asking you to look at this. Why would I do that? Because these assignments here in table 1, this was the foundation, almost like a boot camp, a logic boot camp that I created to make sure that you had the conceptual tools as well as all the rules and methods, strategies, and principles. We worked through so many examples. I had you interactively practicing with me in the videos. I did further explanation, gave you more information that you needed on how to clarify an argument. So this was like setting the foundation, and the extent to which you took this seriously and were engaged with it and then used it, right? So you were supposed to go back to your notes, back to your examples from this when you were doing what? The stuff in here. Of course, your ability to do what is here and to make use of notes and examples was in part a factor of how seriously engaged you were here and whether you actually went back through the lessons and the notes and whatnot. So then I want you to be thinking about that when you think about the extent to which you think your performance, for the assignments noted in table 1 impacted your performance for the assignments noted in the left column. So table 1 captures your performance when you were for learning about and practicing that which you learned about argument, analysis, and clarification. The stuff in table 2 is where you applied all that for a grade. So you should write at least 2 or 3 sentences. The first one can be, saying that I think it impacted, I think X impacted Y a lot, a little, somewhat, or you could even say I'm not sure, and then you need to elaborate. It might help you to look at your scores here and compare them to what you said here, like when you were discussing your averages and your scores. So while you can go to this table to answer this last question, it might be good to recall the gist of the assignments, look at the scores, but also look and see what you said here about your averages, because this is where you analyzed a little bit, your performance outcomes in terms of the scores and the averages. And so that might help you to think about what you want to say right here.